Hello and welcome to Module 1.2, Your Mind and the Creation of Your World. Now remember, all the way back to the introduction, your world is the only one you're ever going to see because it's made on your perceptions, and your perceptions are made of your experiences. And in Module 1.2, we're going to look at the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and Pandora's box, and how they can sometimes be conflicted with each other, which can cause major amounts of anxiety or self-doubt or insecurity, thereby leading to physical stress within the body. How your mind puts your world together, and again, keep in mind your world, your mind, because the only world that you're ever going to see is one through your eyes. Now, I put this picture here of what's known as ideological brain and the creative brain. Now, this is where the two parts are working together. Sometimes we can meet people who are only logical. They only think mathematically, which is essential, obviously, but not the whole perspective. And then sometimes we can meet people who are only creative. They're only emotional. Well, that's too much as well. So we need to have a fine balance. Yes, we need to be creative, but it needs to be balanced by logic. Yeah, and yes, we need to be logical, but it also needs to be balanced by emotion and flair and flow and creativity. This is where the two parts are working together, but this is a separate part from the conscious, subconscious, and Pandora's box. So we have several parts of the mind as we've discussed so far, but I want to bring your attention to that the mind and the brain are actually different parts. So if you will, if you've ever seen a PC, so you've got the PC, which is the physical thing. It's the casing, it's the motherboard, it's the fan, it's the wires that go within. It's the physical thing that you can see, just likened to the physical thing that's inside your very skull, your brain. Now with a PC, you have Windows operating software, and that is likened to the mind. So you've got the brain, which is the physical aspect, and then the operating software within the brain is your mind. Just the same way you've got a PC, and you've got Windows operating software running within the PC. So just wanted to give you a bit of an idea there that the mind and the physical brain are very different. Because very often what I'll do when I'm working through with people is we can have a look at physical trauma and the physical body, which is different to our perceptions. Obviously the two are linked, but there is a difference between them both as well. So now let's take a look at the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, and Pandora's box. How the subconscious mind records your experiences. So it's quite basic, really. We have our head here, and we look out and we see a dog. Now imagine here we are 5 years old, and just imagine in this experience that we've never seen a dog before. Now if we've never seen something before, we've no concept of what it means, what it is. We might have seen it in books, we might have heard about it from other people, but until we come into contact with dog, we have no concept of what dog means. So firstly, we observe the dog through our eyes. This is our perception, but because we haven't got anything stored inside our minds yet, we've nothing to relate it to. Now imagine in this situation, the dog walks up to us out of curiosity, and out of curiosity ourselves, we grab on the dog's fur, being so young, and we try to pull it towards us. We're just curious, we didn't know that might affect the dog in some way. But now imagine that the dog gets scared because we're pulling on its fur. And imagine that it snaps at us to warn us to back off, to stop pulling its fur. And then that experience there, we've seen this dog, we try to interact with it, and then the dog snaps at us, gets internalized inside our minds, and then it gets put on a video. So if you remember a VHS cassette, that gets put on the video. Now you can see there are two reels on that video. So one is the actual experience, And the second reel is the emotional attachment to the experience. And we're going to look at the emotional scale in module 1.3. So again, the two reels are the experience, the physical dog that we've seen, and the second reel is our emotional association to that dog. And here, the emotional association that we actually experienced was we interacted with the dog and it snapped at us, and then that was recorded as pain, a potential threat. Now, obviously, as we've discussed, the emotional association to a situation is our interpretation of that situation. One child, for example, could pull on the dog's fur and the dog could snap and bark. They could see that as the dog's having a bit of fun. Or another child could see the dog as very scary and terrifying. So this is why it's really important to note that each person's view of a situation is relevant to them. It's not how one person might see it and then everybody else should see it the same way. Each person's view of a situation is relevant to them. But the subconscious mind, at the very basic level, will record things as pain or pleasure. So as an overview, we look out over the world, we see the dog, we've no relevance of what dog is, we pull on its fur just out of curiosity, it snaps at us, we internalize that as a painful experience. In our experience, it's a painful experience. It gets recorded onto the video. The first reel is the physical experience that we've seen, and the second reel is the emotional association to that dog. Here, our emotional association is pain. Now, we're going to look at the subconscious mind and playback. So here we have a person again, but this time they've grown up. They're not 5 years old anymore, they're 25 years old. Now, this is a really interesting part. The subconscious mind has no concept of time. The conscious mind does, as we're going to see in a moment, but the subconscious mind has no concept of time, as you're going to see now. So this is in the future, remember, 20 years into the future. Now, a person here who had that dog snap at them has recorded that on the video of the dog snapping at them, and they recorded it as a pain association. Now sees a dog 20 years later. Now imagine it's the same breed as the dog that snapped at them when they were 5 years old, and just imagine they've never seen any other dogs or had any other real interactions with dogs, and they haven't updated that old belief system or the video that they've stored 20 years prior. So the subconscious mind will still believe, not knowing time, will still believe that the video is relevant today. So we see the dog today, and then we go inside our minds and ask, what does this mean? What does this dog mean to us? And then we get a video player, and then we put the video in from the highest association to the dog that we're seeing today. So if it was a collie, for example, collie dog, and that snapped at us when we were 5 years old, and we've not updated that old belief system from 20 years prior, the same video will keep replaying because the mind hasn't updated it. Then what happens is that old video from 20 years ago will get projected onto what's called the internal cinema screen. And then the memory of that dog from 20 years prior that kind of looks like the dog that we see today will get put back in and projected onto the cinema screen. So in essence, we can see a dog today and replay a memory of 20 years ago, and the mind will assume they're both the same. Now, this is when people start saying, I'm being so irrational, but it gets projected on to today from the past, and this causes a feedback loop. So we see a dog today that kind of looks similar to the old dog. We go inside, we ask, what does this mean? The old video gets put on if it's not been updated, and then gets projected onto today. And we, in essence, hallucinate the old memory over today's experience, and that causes anxiety and then physical stress. So remember, when the subconscious mind projects onto today an old memory, it can distort today, and we will literally hallucinate the old memory over today's experience, and that causes the feedback loop. So when people say, they're being irrational, they're overthinking things, they're not. It's just that the subconscious mind is trying to protect that person by keeping them safe from what it thinks is danger. And obviously the way to stop that anxiety and those hallucinations is to update the old video that's being put in the camera. However, there's much more to this than meets the eye. So now let's take a look at how the conscious mind and Pandora's box also play their part. How the subconscious mind works with conscious mind support. So this is about being present. So imagine it's 20 years in the future. Again, we see the dog today. It goes back inside and says, what does this mean? The video comes out, and the video from 20 years prior gets put in the camera where the dog snapped at us. It gets then projected onto the cinema screen inside our minds. We replay the memory from when we were 5 years old. However, this time what happens is the conscious mind gets involved. Now, the difference between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind is that the conscious mind can see today as it is. It does understand time, whereas the subconscious mind doesn't. All it sees is the memories that are being replayed. So to your conscious mind, that video that's been put in the camera from 20 years prior could be today. It doesn't understand. But your conscious mind sees that today is today, and that experience when you were snapped at, when you were 5 years old, is from 20 years ago. So now you've got the conscious mind and subconscious mind that could be seeing things from very different ways, and that's how potential conflict can happen. So then your conscious mind gets your subconscious mind to question, what is my actual reality? Now before, when we looked at when the subconscious mind plays back, we saw that the old video was put in and it hallucinates the old memory over today's experience. So you're getting the old memory and old experience from maybe 20 years ago and today's experience, and they're being merged together. So you're getting actually a distorted view of reality. But when the conscious mind gets involved, it starts to question that and starts to say, I can see you starting to hallucinate about the old memory of that dog, but this is a different dog today. And it asks that question, what is my actual reality? Now again, I want to bring your attention to what I call kind of like the guru mentality. And the guru mentality is just basically stay conscious all the time. Just think in the here and now. But that's completely ignoring the subconscious mind. You see, the subconscious mind has got these videos, and it will keep replaying them and replaying them and replaying them until it needs to update the memories. And the conscious mind, just by asking, what is my actual reality, will not guarantee that the old memory will update. Although it sounds very logical just to ask what is my actual reality, and that will get the subconscious mind to question itself, and the subconscious mind will update itself easily enough. It really doesn't work like that. As we start to look into, for example, guilt and shame, the self-esteem recovery model, there's a lot more to this than simply asking what is my actual reality. When we ask what is my actual reality, it can give us a temporary relief for sure, but it will not guarantee that it will keep on updating the subconscious mind, and especially when the Pandora's box gets involved, which is what we're going to look at now. The Pandora's box mind overpowers the conscious mind. So again, we've got the person in their 20 years into the future when they had that old memory of the dog snapping at them. However, this time I want you to imagine a very different scenario. Remember, Pandora's box stores trauma memories. So remember before when we imagined when you're 5 years old, the dog kind of snapped and he barked and that was as far as it went. But this time, I wouldn't imagine a person went through a very traumatic experience with a dog. This time, it could have been when they were 5 years old. They pulled on the dog's fur, but this dog was maybe ill, for example, and it just went ballistic and it bit the child. He sunk its teeth right into them. He started dragging them along. And then the owner of the dog got the dog off that person and then hit the child around the head, screaming at the child, saying that it's their fault, they were upsetting the dog. And then, say, imagine the parents of the child came along, hit the child as well, picked up the child, took them home, threw them into the room, didn't bother addressing their wounds, and told them that they're not lovable as a child because they're stupid and they keep upsetting the neighbour's dog, for example. Now, obviously, any human being alive would see that at any age as a trauma. But as a 5-year-old child, when you're completely helpless in the world, that will be an extreme trauma. And that would be, obviously it's a very extreme case, but that would be something that would be in Pandora's box. So imagine that scenario now. And that is the memory that has been stored in their subconscious mind, buried down inside Pandora's box. So the person this time, 20 years later, sees a dog that kind of similar, looks like the one that bit them and sunk their teeth into them when they were 5 years old. Again, the subconscious mind will ask, what does this mean? Then, Pandora's box has trapped the memory away of when they got bitten and then they were basically abused by 2 adults. And then that's where that memory will be stored. And you can see the big thick black line around it. That's to show that it's separate from, or it's kind of like the cellar inside the subconscious mind. Now, the video cassette can play through Pandora's box, even though the conscious mind cannot always see into Pandora's box. So the video of the extreme trauma then gets played through Pandora's box, goes onto the very dark internal cinema screen, and that entire memory starts to be replayed. Remember though, the conscious mind is not always aware that that memory is being played because the subconscious mind is trying to keep Pandora's box separate from the conscious mind. Then it goes up inside the conscious mind. The conscious mind tries to get involved, feeling all the physical stress coming up and the anxiety and the flood of thoughts of the old memory. But then what happens is Pandora's box just completely overpowers. As you can see that big grey triangle, it completely covers over the conscious mind, blocking out everything. However, what you can still see is that from the eyes, the green line going to the dog and the red line going back, we can still get a very stress-based feedback loop. But as you can see, the conscious mind is completely blocked out. Now, if you've ever experienced something called a stress trigger or a panic attack, this is basically, there's a lot more to it than that, obviously, but this is basically what's happened. The subconscious mind is completely taken over. The conscious mind is trying to bring our attention back to today and say, look, this is a memory from 20 years ago and it's not relevant today. But Pandora's box, terrified that the experience that we experienced might happen again, completely shuts off the conscious mind and says you have to be very aware of this situation because you do not want that trauma to have happened again. And the stress trigger is where there are so many stress hormones going through our physical body that everything goes into hyperdrive. And again, this is where a panic attack can happen. We're going to look at more of the stress triggers later on, but it could be emotional overwhelm, or it could be physiological shutdown. If you've ever had a panic attack, you'll know they are horrible in every way. I've had 3 in my life, and I never want to experience them ever again. They are so overwhelming. And that's because the conscious mind is completely blocked out. So that is where, when, again, going back to this guru mentality where it's just about think positive and just stay in the moment. Obviously, Pandora's box, if it thinks you're in danger, it will completely crush the conscious mind in a split second. And that is why just being present and just thinking positive does not always work. And very often it's very, very temporary. And what we're going to go into in the rest of this course, and there's a lot of information in this course, so make sure you're making notes all the way through. What we're going to focus on is all about the subconscious mind, and especially around Pandora's box, to make sure that you don't need to keep thinking positive and being in the moment and bringing yourself back present all the time. Because if you can update Pandora's box, and you can, it's just how. Because when you take the steps to update Pandora's box memories, and it's not quite as easy as just saying, I'll update them. There's a lot of complexities goes into Pandora's box. But once Pandora's box memories have been updated, or subconscious memories have been updated, then you won't need to keep bringing yourself back to present moment. You won't need to keep thinking positive all the time, because you'll just be in harmony with Pandora's box, subconscious mind, and the conscious mind. And that is how you get each of these three parts of your mind to work together. But obviously, there's a lot more to it than just thinking positive. But again, as mentioned, there's a lot more to it than just thinking positive. So if you see these things online of where people can be very convincing sometimes of just think positive and be in the now and just imagine it, the future that you want, and what fires together wires together, it really doesn't work like that, and there's a lot being left out. And this is selling people short a lot of the time, because very often people will go down this mindset of, I've just got to be in the moment and it'll all be all right, and it doesn't work out. And going back to, remember, the girl jumping for joy when she was setting off on a goal, and then the young lady feeling really frustrated. A lot of people get caught up in that with this hype psychology. They want to overcome their anxieties, they want to overcome the stress, but they're given really poor advice that doesn't work, and then we can end up feeling really frustrated. And the reason that I know that that's the truth is because I was that person. I don't mean to sound too dark here, but I was suicidal at one point in my life. And I wasn't suicidal because I was just having a bad day. I was suicidal because I didn't know what else to do. And I kept getting these gurus telling me, just think positive. Are you feeling really bad? Just think about what you do want in life. Just imagine all the things that you could be grateful for. And when we're dealing with Pandora's box, it really is very dangerous advice just to keep thinking positive all the time. Yes, it's important to think about the things that you want to move towards. But if just thinking positive isn't getting you the results, there's a lot more to it that you need to focus on. So now obviously that is a lot of information to go through. We've looked at the subconscious mind, how the conscious mind interacts, and then Pandora's box. And you can see just on this visual image here all these lines and arrows and circles and question marks and all these things going all over the place. And this is very often what it can feel like inside our minds. Now then, when we looked at the boxes, and we've got all these different parts of our life, and this is just one experience. This is just a memory of a dog. But again, we've got our main headings of our life, and then we could have 10 parts of each of the main headings, so we've got 50 parts. We can have hundreds of experiences during the day that can cause this loop to happen. And eventually, that can cause physiological stress, and eventually, that can cause physiological exhaustion. And we get tired, and things start to struggle. So remember, nobody's lazy, nobody's a procrastinator, nobody is irrational. It's just that very few of us are ever taught about how the mind actually works. So I want you to stop the training now and go over everything that we've covered so far and understand how your interpretation of all this happens. Because this is just my view of it. But could you make this into a story? Could you make this more creative? But also, again, if it feels comfortable, I want you to think about when you've experienced things like this before. When you've got feedback loops from your subconscious mind and you may have thought, I'm being so irrational. Or when you've felt anxiety about something and you've brought yourself back present and your conscious mind had that power just to give you some breathing space. Or when you've had a trigger and your conscious mind's tried to get involved, and Pandora's box has just come along and shut the whole thing down and said, no, you will remember this memory. And you can feel the stress building, you can feel the anxiety building, you can maybe even have a panic attack or just feel like you need to hide away from everything. Stop the training now, again, only if you feel comfortable, because this can be quite a sensitive area. And then when you've done that, we'll move on.